Everyone feared the arrogant billionaire until the waitress humiliated him in front of everyone. Sometimes, the most powerful lesson comes from the most unexpected person. Picture this: the Golden Oak restaurant, where crystal chandelier is cast, warm light across mahogany tables, and the city's elite gathered for their Friday evening ritual. At table 7 sat Adrian Blackwell, 42, whose pharmaceutical empire made him one of the richest men in the state. His Armani suit cost more than most people made in 6 months, and his reputation for crushing anyone who dared cross him was legendary. Every waiter in the restaurant walked on eggshells around him, aware of the careers ruined by a single bad review from Adrian Blackwell. But tonight, something different was about to happen. Tonight, he'd meet Elena Morales, a 36-year-old single mother working her second job as a waitress. She had been serving tables for only 3 weeks, trying to make ends meet after her husband's death left her drowning in medical bills. Elena didn't know who Adrian was, and frankly, she didn't care about his money or power. Adrian tapped his platinum Rolex against the white tablecloth, his jaw clenched as he scanned the dining room. He had been waiting exactly for minutes for someone to take his order, which in his world might as well have been for hours. The Golden Oak was supposed to be the finest establishment in the city, yet here he sat, ignored like some common customer. His steel gray eyes narrowed as he watched other diners being served. The gentle murmur of conversation and clinking silverware only added to his irritation. Elena emerged from the kitchen, balancing 3 plates on her left arm while carrying a water pitcher in her right hand. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and despite the exhaustion shadowing her brown eyes, she moved with quiet dignity. The black uniform hung a bit loose on her frame, a reminder of the stress-induced weight loss she had experienced over the past year. She had been caring for her late husband during his final months, watching their savings disappear into a mountain of medical bills that no insurance seemed willing to cover. "Excuse me?" Adrian's voice cut through the ambient noise like a blade. His tone carried the authority of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. "I've been sitting here for an eternity. Don't you people understand the concept of service?" Elena set down the plates at table 12 before turning toward him, her movements unhurried. She had dealt with demanding customers before, back when she worked retail during college. Taking a deep breath, she approached his table with a gentle smile that didn't quite reach her tired eyes. "I apologize for the wait, sir. I'll be right with you." "Right with me?" Adrian leaned back in his chair, his voice rising just enough for nearby tables to notice. "Young lady, do you have any idea who I am? I could buy this restaurant with my pocket change. I don't wait for anyone, especially not some inexperienced waitress who clearly doesn't understand how the real world works." The conversation at neighboring tables began to quiet as diners turned their attention toward the commotion. Elena felt the familiar knot forming in her stomach, the same feeling she'd experienced when creditors called, demanding payment she couldn't make. But something else stirred within her too, a spark of determination that had gotten her through nursing school as a teen mother and kept her working 2 jobs while her husband fought cancer. "I understand you're hungry, sir," she replied evenly, pulling out her order pad. "What can I get started for you this evening?" Adrian's face flushed red. In boardrooms across the country, executives trembled when he raised his voice. Politicians returned his calls within minutes. Yet this waitress, this nobody, was treating him like any other customer. The audacity was breathtaking. "What you can get started," Adrian said slowly, his words dripping with condescension, "is a manager who understands that some customers matter more than others." The restaurant manager, a nervous man named Martin Hayes, who had spent the last 5 years catering to Adrian's every whim, appeared at the table within seconds. His hands trembled slightly as he approached, already calculating how much money the restaurant might lose if Adrian decided to take his business elsewhere. Martin had seen Adrian humiliate staff before, had watched promising careers end with a single phone call to the right people in the industry. "Mr. Blackwell," Martin said, his voice barely above a whisper, "is there a problem here?" "I can personally ensure that." "The problem," Adrian interrupted, not taking his eyes off Elena, "is that your staff apparently doesn't understand basic respect. This waitress seems to think she can make me wait like some ordinary customer." Elena felt her cheeks warm, but not from embarrassment. She thought about her 8-year-old daughter, Sophie, waiting at home, probably doing homework at their small kitchen table under the flickering light they couldn't afford to replace. She thought about the eviction notice tucked inside her purse, the final notice. That gave them 30 days to come up with 3 months' rent. She had taken this job specifically because the Golden Oak paid better than most places. But now she could see her newfound income slipping away. "Sir," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her chest. "I was serving other customers who arrived before you. I believe in treating everyone fairly." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Several diners at nearby tables exchanged glances, some nodding subtly in approval, while others seemed shocked that anyone would dare speak to Adrian Blackwell that way. Adrian himself looked as though he had been slapped. In his world, money bought deference, respect, and immediate attention. The concept of fairness waiting his turn like everyone else was foreign and insulting. "Let me explain something to you about fairness, sweetheart." Adrian's laugh was cold and sharp. "I employ over 15,000 people. I've donated millions to charities in this city. My taxes probably pay for half the public services you use. That's what fairness looks like in the real world." Elena nodded slowly, processing his words. Then she did something that surprised everyone in the restaurant, including herself. She smiled, not the practiced smile of customer service, but something genuine and almost pitying. "That's wonderful that you've been so successful, sir," she said, "but right now you're just another customer who wants to order dinner. So what would you like to eat?" The silence that followed was deafening. Adrian's face cycled through several shades of red as he processed the complete dismissal of his status, his wealth, his power. Martin looked like he might faint. Other diners pretended to focus on their meals while straining to hear every word of this unprecedented confrontation. "You have no idea what you've just done," Adrian said, standing slowly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "I'll make sure you never work in this city again." Elena felt the weight of every eye in the restaurant on her, as Adrian's threat hung in the air like smoke. She'd heard stories about powerful men who could destroy lives with a phone call, but she'd never imagined finding herself in their crosshairs. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her order pad, thinking about Sophie's school fees due next week and the medical bills that kept arriving. Even though her husband had been gone for 8 months, "Mr. Blackwell." "Please," Martin stammered, stepping between them. "I'm sure we can resolve this misunderstanding, Elena." "Perhaps you should." "No," Elena said firmly, surprising herself with the strength in her voice. "I'm not going to apologize for doing my job properly." She looked directly at Adrian, and for the first time she really saw him beneath the expensive suit and arrogant posture. She recognized something familiar in his eyes. It was the same look she'd seen in her bathroom mirror during those dark months, watching her husband waste away. The look of someone who'd forgotten how to connect with other human beings. "You want to know what I see when I look at you," Elena continued, her voice gentle but unwavering. "I see a man who's so afraid of being treated like everyone else that he has to remind people constantly how important he is. I've met people like you before, sir. They were in the hospital where my husband died. Rich patients who demanded private rooms and special treatment, who acted like their money made their pain more important than everyone else's." Adrian's mouth opened, but no words came out. The comparison to hospital patients struck something deep inside him, a memory he'd buried years ago, of his own father lying in a charity ward, too proud to accept help from the son who'd become everything he'd never been. "The difference," Elena continued, "was that when those patients were really scared, when they thought no one was looking, they were just like everyone else. They held their wives' hands and worried about their children. They said, please and thank you to the nurses who stayed late to hold their hands." The restaurant had become completely silent, except for the soft jazz playing from hidden speakers. Adrian felt something crack inside his chest, a wall he'd built so carefully over the years to protect himself from the poverty and powerlessness of his childhood. He thought about his ex-wife, who'd left him 2 years ago, saying she couldn't remember the last time he'd looked at her like she was a person instead of an asset. "My husband never made more than $40,000 a year," Elena said softly. "But when he was dying, he still said please and thank you to everyone who helped him, even when the cancer made him angry and scared. He remembered that we're all just people trying to get through each day. Adrian sat back down heavily. The fight suddenly drained out of him. Around the restaurant, diners began to whisper among themselves. But the whispers weren't about Elena anymore. They were about the man who'd just been quietly, devastatingly reminded of his own humanity. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before Adrian finally spoke, his voice barely audible. "What was your husband's name?" The question surprised everyone, including Elena, who hadn't expected this powerful man to acknowledge her personal story at all. "David," she replied softly. "David Morales. He was a mechanic." She paused, studying Adrian's face, which had lost all traces of its earlier arrogance. "He used to say that you could tell everything about a person by how they treated people who couldn't do anything for them." Adrian's hands, which had been clenched into fists moments before, slowly relaxed on the white tablecloth. "My father was a janitor," he said quietly. "Worked nights cleaning office buildings downtown. He used to tell me that respect wasn't something you could buy, that it had to be earned fresh every day." His voice grew even softer. "I haven't thought about that in years." Martin stood frozen, unsure whether he was witnessing a breakdown or a breakthrough. The other diners had stopped pretending to eat, completely absorbed in this unexpected turn of events. Elena pulled out the chair across from Adrian and sat down, her movements gentle and deliberate. "What happened to him?" she asked. "Cancer," Adrian replied, the word coming out like a confession. "Lung cancer. Couldn't afford the treatments I could easily pay for now." He looked up at Elena with eyes that suddenly seemed much older than his 42 years. "He died in a county hospital while I was in graduate school, building the empire that was supposed to prove I was better than where I came from." Elena reached across the table and gently placed her hand over his. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said simply. "David always said that grief changes us, but we get to choose whether it makes us harder or softer." Adrian stared at their joined hands, remembering the last time someone had offered him comfort without wanting something in return. It had been his father, the night before he left for college, pressing a $20 bill into his palm, despite barely having enough money for groceries. "I became harder," Adrian admitted. "I thought if I could accumulate enough power, enough money, enough fear, I'd never feel helpless again." He laughed bitterly. "But I've been helpless this whole time. I just didn't realize it." Round them, the restaurant seemed to collectively hold its breath as this powerful man continued his quiet confession. "I haven't had a real conversation with another human being in months. Every interaction is about what someone wants from me or what I want from them. I can't remember the last time someone looked at me and saw a person instead of a bank account." Elena squeezed his hand gently. "Well," she said with a small smile, "I'm looking at you right now and I just see Adrian. Someone who misses his father and forgot how to be kind." Adrian felt tears he hadn't shed in years threatening to surface. For the first time since his father's death, he felt the possibility of becoming the man he'd once hoped to be. 3 months later, Elena wiped down the last table of her evening shift at the Golden Oak, her movements more relaxed than they'd been in years. The restaurant bustled with its usual Friday night energy, but there was something different in the atmosphere, a warmth that hadn't existed before. She smiled as she watched Adrian at his usual table, sharing dinner with Sophie, who was explaining her latest school project with animated gestures. "And then the butterfly comes out completely different," Sophie was saying, her 8-year-old voice filled with wonder. "Mrs. Henderson says it's called metamorphosis." "That's a beautiful word," Adrian replied, and Elena could hear the genuine interest in his voice. "Sometimes people can go through metamorphosis, too." The transformation hadn't happened overnight. After that pivotal evening, Adrian had returned the next week not to demand special treatment, but to apologize properly to the entire staff. He'd asked Elena if he could take her to lunch, not as a customer or an employer, but as someone who wanted to learn how to be human again. Over coffee at a small diner near Sophie's school, he'd listened to stories about David's kindness, about the community of neighbors who'd helped Elena through the darkest months, about the simple joy of Sophie's laughter echoing through their small apartment. In return, Adrian had shared memories of his father's gentle wisdom, the dreams he'd abandoned in pursuit of success, and the loneliness that had grown like a cancer in his chest. Martin approached Elena as she finished closing duties. "He's paid off all the medical bills," he said quietly, nodding toward Adrian's table. "Anonymously through some charity foundation." "Thought you should know." Elena felt tears prick her eyes, but they were tears of gratitude rather than sorrow. Adrian had done more than clear her debts. He'd funded scholarships for children of single parents, quietly donated to the local food bank, and most importantly, had started treating every person he encountered with the dignity his father had taught him to value. "And Elena," Sophie called out using the honorary title Adrian had taught her. "Adrian says he wants to learn how to make your famous chocolate chip cookies." Elena laughed, a sound that had become more frequent since the weight of financial worry had lifted from her shoulders. "Well, then I suppose we'll have to teach him. But first, he needs to learn that the secret ingredient isn't something you can buy." "What is it?" Adrian asked, his expression genuinely curious. "Love," Elena replied simply. "Every good thing starts with love." As the evening wound down and the last customers departed, Elena reflected on how a single moment of choosing kindness over fear had changed two lives completely. Sometimes the most powerful people in the world were the ones who'd forgotten how to be powerless, and sometimes it took a gentle reminder to help them remember their own humanity.